Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. I'm your host, Misha McKittrick. This is a podcast where I believe that as you take time for a mindset check, you have more power than you think you do, and where we also believe that you have the power to reset the chemicals in your body. That's what we're going to get into today. Just a reminder, in the future, we are going to be having a really cool conversation about the vibrations in your body and about resetting the tone, the tune, the vibration of your nervous system. It's so cool. I'm really excited to get into it with you. We're going to be reviewing a book called Human Tuning by John Buelow. And if you want, you can read the book and be even more invested in the conversation. So in preparation for that conversation that's coming up, I'll go ahead and put the link to the book in the show notes below so that you can join in if you want. If you don't read the book, all the conversation that we have will still really make sense to you and it will still light a fire. But the book is just helping us find that we have access to so much more by tuning our body with these tuning forks. And I can't even wait to really get into that. Okay, but I just want to tell you that's on the horizon. It's coming up. So go ahead and get the book and get reading, because the first night I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't put this down. And it was midnight when I checked the clock next, and I was like, oh wow, I read for way longer than I thought I was reading. So it really grabbed me and drew me in. All right, we're back in season 3. Hoping you are loving this new format. It's really exciting to me. So many things up and coming. And I also just wanted to remind you that feel free to submit a Hey Mish. A Hey Mish is really just you reaching out and saying, hey Mish, what about this? Or I have a question about that. Or whatever it is that you have a quandary about inside of you, maybe about something that we've talked about in the past, something you want me to expand on, or something about your personal life. P.S. You can submit anonymously, or I can know who you are without the crowd knowing who you are. However you want to do it, you just need to send an email to hello@myfriendmisha.com and just send me whatever it is that's on your heart. I would love to be in it with you. All right, let's jump into our topic today. I'm really, really pumped to be able to talk about this with you. This is something that is such a fire in my heart. It's the to be continued of what we mentioned last week. You remember when I was like, oh yeah, and this goes so much further, but let's put that on the to be continued. So last week we talked about how, what comes first, a thought or a feeling. We talked about how our thoughts are a byproduct. We talked about how the real equation is that we feel and then we think. And then all of that has to do with the chemicals that are released in our body. And it all starts with how we feel. It all starts with how we feel. And when we start to really understand that on a deep level, all of a sudden we get the imbalance in our life differently. We understand that we are being a certain way, and it routes back to, where it all begins. And because we're able to see that, we're able to do something better. We're able to make a difference in our life. That's what we're going to talk about. So as we're getting into this, I want you to know that it's really important that you are just observing yourself. In other words, that you're not judging yourself. This is a platform where we get to truly recognize what's going on and not allow the voice that comes in and beats yourself up sometimes. Just the voice of, oh, I see this differently. And because I see it differently, I can do things differently. So to start off, I want you to internalize as I ask you these questions. Do you find yourself? This is on average most of the time. We all experience these things, but I'm talking about a very high percentage of your life. Do you find yourself being uptight, being worried, being reactive, being stressed, being overwhelmed, being low, down, or sad? And if you resonate with one of these, just so you know, that isn't you. It's not actually who you are. These are conditions in our body that we unknowingly create. If you can relate, the chemical concoction that's happening inside of you is so strong that this has actually become your personality. You may think this will always be part of you. You may even believe it's who you are. But that is not true. You can change this. You can do things that cause your body to produce different chemicals. When you get this equation figured out, you start to change so much that you feel like you've created a new person. And it's amazing. Today, we're talking about how our heart can assist us in recreating the chemical environment that exists inside of our body. So essentially what happens inside of your body chemically is that your body releases these hormones and chemicals based on the emotions that you feel. Have you ever felt like completely exhausted, even though you did little physically and may have not skipped sleep? It's because your emotions can drain or charge your battery. And your emotions are your choice. They don't always feel like your choice, okay? Because we become addicted to negativity and we're so conditioned to respond or react quickly to the environment, the things that we're feeling and the things that we're exposed to and the things people do around us. But I promise you that you can change that and that space will come. Space meaning you don't automatically feel a feeling because of something else that happens. You can be in the height of a lot of stress, whether it's in a business or financially or in your family. Things might be falling apart. And just to be clear, you still let emotions run through you, okay? Because that's like very healthy. And we have to feel what normal human beings need to feel. We need to process all those feelings. But what happens is a lot of times we experience these moments of high stress or grief or, overwhelming weight. And then we, start feeling these things on a regular basis and we become addicted. And so we feel that over and over and over and over in our life. And then life is just different. It's interesting when you look at a child, and a child is like naive and free. And nobody ever wishes to place the weight of the world on the child's back because they completely enjoy and almost get lost in the unknowing that the child has, in the freedom and the ability that the child has to be happy. And then let's go all the way to the opposite side of old age. And it's so interesting to me to look at people who are lemons and they are so angry and upset with life and the world and nothing ever works out for them and they're lonely and they're sad, right? And what's funny is that you can also observe people who are old, who are grateful, who are happy, who tell jokes, who make your life better, who impart wisdom to you and who walk around with lightness in their body, like based on weight, right? Like not their weight, but just the feeling of lightness. And then also the light that exudes them that seems to, like a light bulb is turned on in them. And it's interesting to me that we can go from being a child and that innocence and naivety, and that innocence can dissipate. And then we allow ourselves all the weight of what we experience in life. And it's what we do with all of those things, with the emotions that we train ourselves to feel on a regular basis. Because during that great big span of life, there are going to be struggles and adversities and things that we experience. But at the end of the day, how we feel and how we think and how we process the things, right? If we really allow ourselves to feel those feelings, we can process them and move on. If we sweep them under the rug, or if we get addicted to the negativity of it, we put it on repeat. And then our life is like that over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and it's the Groundhog Day, and we never wake up from it. And then when we're old, the patterns of what we have set forward in our life are what's there. And one day I made a pact with my friends on the beach. We were playing smash ball and we made a smash ball pact with our paddles that when we were old, that we would not be a lemon, that we would not be grumpy and bitter, that we would be better for everything that we went through in our life, that we will process and remember to come back to the feelings that feel good, that we will be old people who are happy and that live with vigor. That was the promise that we made on the beach, that when we're 80 years old, that we will still feel with our heart good feelings and the joyness and the vastness and the beauty of life. And so I want to talk to you a little bit in depth about these feelings and the emotions and the chemicals that are associated with our emotions. Now, here's what's interesting, right? If you don't think that emotions are your choice, then I really want you to go to a time when you've been in a fight with your spouse or with someone, okay? And you remember how they leave for work or an extended period of time, and you go about your day and you're happy and you reset and you're like, yes, and you're doing the work or whatever. And then remember how it is when they walk in the door and you're like, oh yeah, I'm really mad at you. I'm upset with you. And I'm feeling that now. And oh yeah, I'm all of a sudden reminded because you walked in the door. Sometimes it takes like extreme circumstances like that for us to remember that our emotions are a choice. So I want you to picture a grid where at the very top is like a sympathetic heart rate, which is a high heart rate. Like your heart is beating and going fast. And at the bottom is parasympathetic, where it's that lower heart rate, right? Where you're a little bit more relaxed in your emotions. And then I want you to picture on the right-hand side that all of the right-hand side emotions are feel-good emotions. So on the right at the top, we have things that are like happy, enthusiastic, passionate, courageous, right? Those feelings that are good, but they're associated with a high heart rate. And then on the lower side, the parasympathetic side that are good, we have the appreciative, the calm, the content, the gratitude, all of these deeply, incredibly beneficial feelings. It's a beautiful place to be, but they are associated with your heart rate being low and relaxed. Okay? And then on the left-hand side, you can imagine that the emotions that are associated with the high heart rate that are at the top, they're like angry, frustrated, overwhelmed, right? Like really, really charged negative feelings. And then underneath that, on the bottom, we have feelings that are in conjunction with a lower heart rate, that parasympathetic, but that are emotions that drain you. So sad, bored, hopeless, right? And if you look at this grid, in a sense, this hypothetical grid that we've drawn in your mind, on both ends of the spectrum, all the way right and all the way left, they have studied and figured out that when we're feeling those emotions, that we are actually releasing a cascade of chemicals and hormones. So the ones that deplete us, that take our energy away from us, that's cortisol. And that cortisol is the main stress hormone in your body. And we need cortisol, but too much of it has a negative effect. Cortisol releases to help us, okay, when we're in like a pressure or a dangerous situation. But when those things have passed, our cortisol should calm down and we should be able to return to normal, like our other body systems, our heart, our blood pressure, all of these things should return to normal. But if you're under constant stress by either high heart rate or low heart rate depleting emotions, stress, overwhelm, worry, then that alarm button, so to say, that's releasing the cortisol in our body stays on, and it can derail your body's most important functions. It can lead to all of these problems of health and issues like anxiety, depression, heartaches, heart disease, memory, problems with digestion, trouble sleeping, weight gain, so many of those things. And they also completely drain your inner battery. They can make you feel exhausted. This actually keeps your body in this high alert state, and that makes you over respond to added stressors that happen in life, which contributes to you having very low resilience, like not being able to handle situations well. So it's really important to start to take an internal inventory on the question, are you producing more cortisol than your body actually needs? Super important. And on the flip side of the chart, on the right-hand side, we have what's called DHEA. And DHEA is a hormone that your body naturally produces, and it helps produce other hormones. This hormone is known as anti-aging, and it has a regenerative effect on our physiology, on our body. It renews us. It makes us feel charged. You know, moments when you check into love or an excited situation and you have that beautiful feeling inside of your chest and you feel renewed in life? It's because there's different chemicals that are being released in your body. So DHEA helps us produce all of the good things, the feel good, all of the stuff in our body that makes us feel charged and happy, and puts us on the drip of oxytocin and the drip of dopamine. These are chemicals that make your body feel good. And what's important to know is that when our body feels chemicals, our body becomes used to feeling chemicals. And so we set these patterns in our body. And our body has a tendency to create the things that will make us feel those chemicals, because that concoction, that recipe, that prescription is what our body is used to feeling. So whatever we're used to feeling, you can bet that that will be on repeat in our life, no matter what. And for you, you have the power to come in and reset those patterns. You have the power to start to notice and be very clear, where am I on this chart right now today? And how can I shift? That is so much of what I teach in my courses, is the how to shift. How do I actually, Mish, but I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling upset. So how do I actually shift? Because that person needs to, I almost said die, but I don't want to say die. Right? Like it can be so visceral. Like we have very deep and raw feelings. And that shift and the need to shift is sometimes can feel like added pressure, right? But the thing is when we teach our body how to be in heart coherence on a regular basis, you're automatically shifting those baseline emotions that you feel all the time. And it becomes less about a fight inside of your mind about how to shift and more of something that happens automatically. You might have a heated moment, and instead of staying high and, all of that cortisol pumping and flowing through your body and the stress and the worry and the overwhelm just staying present with you, you can come back down. You breathe easy and you feel okay. And what's better about that situation is that you have more mental capacity to be able to handle what's in front of you. You see doors that can open, that can help you in the situation, because you have more cognitive ability when you're not so charged. So the emotions that you feel determine the hormones and the chemicals that your body produces. And as you can see, that's also synonymous with your resilience, your ability to handle life as it's coming at you with a clear mind without having that drained battery, right? You have more charge in it so that you can deal with sticky situations, so that you're more efficient and even excited to do the work that's in front of you, whatever it is that you need to do. And so I hope you can start to see now that your emotions are your choice. There are also ways of being able to shift your emotions that we go into in the Heart Sync course. So when you find yourself charged in a bad way and you're like in those depleting emotions, you can shift. You can come at least to neutral, and most of the time you can shift all the way to good. And it's just by using your heart and allowing it to help you to shift, to move. And the more that you do it over and over, you reset what's called a baseline. And your baseline is the way that you feel most of the time, the highest percentage of your days. That's your baseline. You're going to feel lots of things in life. You're going to feel lots of emotions. You're also going to go through real things: heartache, grief, adversity, struggle. But those things can refine you. You don't have to sign up for the suffering that endures and goes for a long time because of those things came into your life. Your chemical makeup is simply a habit. The way that you are used to feeling, it's simply a habit. You have everything inside of you that you need to be able to create a new internal state. Now, I want to tell you a couple of stories about nature because I love nature. There's a book called The Man Who Planted Trees, and it's a story of a man who decides to plant hundreds of thousands of trees. And slowly, the community of animals and humans around him actually comes back to life. There's a part in the book when it talks about him laying out heaps of acorns on the table, and he inspects them one by one. And then, once he has gathered maybe 100 of these acorns, he puts them in a bucket and he goes to bed. The next day he wakes up, he puts those acorns in water, and he goes out into the field with a great big stick, and he continues to lift the soil and put an acorn, and lift the soil and put an acorn. And the man that was with him, the narrator describes, there's a peace in being with this man. What happened is that over time, he completely changed the landscape of France, and he changed communities. There's another story about Wangari Maathai, and this girl became aware of the importance of trees when she was little, because where she lived, there were lots of trees, And over time, she watched this land that she lived on. The trees became destroyed, and the stream where she used to play was dried up. And it was all because there was more focus on growing these cash crops that kind of came in and took over the land. So it's kind of like a sad story. But because of this woman was so charged in her heart, and she was able to see the value of trees and what they did to the land. She came across some rural women in Kenya, and they had to walk far to gather firewood. Their families were malnourished and their land was degraded. And she could see that planting trees would provide these women with firewood, with fruit, with everything that they needed for their livestock and fencing for their land. And it would also stop soil erosion and keep streams flowing. She says this is not a mystical phenomenon, it's a fact of nature. Human beings cannot thrive in a place where the natural environment has been degraded. I hope you're starting to understand that this is applicable also to your internal environment. So this woman and the organization that she founded ended up planting trees all over Africa and changing the environment. So beautiful. The first time I actually really became aware that trees completely changed the environment was a documentary called Mully. Have you ever heard of this documentary? If you haven't, it's such a great one to put on your list to watch with your family. It tells the story of his life from when he was young until he grew up, and then he became a millionaire, and he started to see that he needed to give back, and he needed to change the way that he was, the priorities essentially that he was setting forth in his life. And so he started adopting all of these young kids that were stranded and abandoned and orphans in the slums. And he ended up creating this incredible orphanage. And they actually moved to a remote place where, by a stroke of luck, they found water underground, and they were able to plant all of these trees. And today, this area that he planted all these trees in is a self-sustaining microclimate. So, in other words, what happened is because he planted these trees, the rains would come and water the trees. It changed the way that the climate interacted with what was happening on the ground. That part blew my mind when I watched it. And this man was able to create a farm where they grew vegetables, and they ended up selling these vegetables on international markets. And he was able to provide homes for all of these people who, otherwise would have grown up in the slums and kind of become the riffraff of Africa. It is a really beautiful story. But it, to me, was a great example of how we can change and alter the climate. And today, I hope that you're seeing that that applies to your internal climate. There's a quote from the Heart Math Institute that says, "We have within us the power to lift our emotional states, increase our resilience, and discern the highest choices for our mental, emotional, and physical well-being." When we change the climate inside of us, it changes our abilities. It charges our batteries. It helps us to be able to have what we need to actually be able to function well in this life. In this life that some deem as hard. You have to answer, are you going to call it hard too? Do you want to sign up for that? By being proactive about your heart feelings, instead of waiting for something outside of you to allow you to feel good, to give you permission, right? To shift into something that feels good. You can shift and actually take control into your own hands. You create a new life. You create a different way of existing inside of you. And you, by doing that, make life so much better, so much easier, and quite frankly, happier, more enjoyable, more bounteous, more beautiful. more abundant, more lovely. It's an equation, and it's really simple. It's really, really easy. But I hope that today you started to open your eyes to see that you have more power than you think you do when you choose to consciously reset the chemicals in your body. Thank you so much for being with us today. Hopefully you loved that episode and got something out of it. If you did, invitation to share it with someone that you love. If you're interested in learning more about heart coherence and the Heart Sync course, then check out the links in the show notes. I have a couple of free mini classes that you can go take a look at, and they kind of explain a little bit more about heart coherence and what the Heart Sync class all entails. And there will also be a link for you there to be able to purchase the course. Also, if you want to support the Mindset Check podcast, you can by shopping and using our link on Amazon. So as you're prepping your family to move into spring and all of the adventures and the newness and restoring of your home and your house and all of the fun comings and goings, if you use our link, we get kickbacks, and that helps us to be able to further the podcast along, which is so helpful and good for us. It's really as easy and as simple as, instead of just going to Amazon.com, going to Amazon.com/shop/my-friend-Misha. Whenever you shop at that link, we get a little bit of a kickback, and it charges you the exact same price that you would have paid simply by just going to Amazon.com. So we would really appreciate that if you keep that in the forefront of your mind as you shop on Amazon. And as we close, I want to leave you with some words by Joe Dispenza. He says, by intentionally choosing to feel the elevated emotions of the heart, rather than waiting for something outside of yourself to elicit those emotions, you become who you are truly meant to be. Until next time, my friend.